Before I get started with this review, I feel like I should let you guys and gals know a few things. One, I am not a big Harry Potter fan. And two, I wasn't actually even planning on playing this game and felt that the trailers for this game were very boring. So keeping that in mind, I can still say that I absolutely loved this game, which means that a Harry Potter fan would probably end up feeling a lot stronger about that. Like half the time I don't even know what the game is referencing from the movies because the game barely ends up explaining any of it, which is a good thing, by the way. Like I definitely prefer how subtle this game is with its lore rather than trying to explain everything. And the too long didn't read version of this video is that Hogwarts Legacy is a game made for Harry Potter fans, but I loved it anyways. So let's start with the story. The writing is some of the best there is in video games. Like, I loved almost all of the characters in the game, and even the characters that I found kind of annoying, I didn't really find them annoying for the same reasons I do in most games. It was more so because they wrote this character to be annoying. Like, sure, almost all of the side quests is going to be somebody making some excuse that you have to do their task for them. But it's all laid out very, very convincingly because of the incredible voice actors in this game. Like the majority of the quests are either very whimsical or quite touching. And one of the things that I really appreciated was that some of the more main side quests ended up having conclusions that had the character reveal the reason why they were chasing after this goal in the first place, and it was a very satisfying feeling. Like, oh, so that's why this person's doing this. Gameplay in Hogwarts Legacy can be broken down into two categories, which is exploration and combat. But there's a lot more to it than you think. So let's talk about the combat first. The main star of the show is definitely the spell casting. See, what Hogwarts Legacy does quite well is it'll give you a spell with a basic mechanic and then slowly introduce other spells that you can combine with it. Like you'll have a spell for pushing, a spell for pulling, a spell for flipping, a spell for lifting up, a spell for pushing down, and all of these can be used for both exploration and combat. Like levitating an enemy into the air and then slamming him down into the ground. One layer of complexity is that each spell is color-coded to the school of magic it comes from, and enemies will end up having certain strengths and weaknesses to each of those different colored spells. So you're constantly swapping your spells around in order to fit the situation. Now, simultaneously, this is where some problems start to show up, because the combat can be very overwhelming and wants you to cast a specific spell on a specific enemy, and yet the targeting system in this game sucks. Like one of the worst enemies in Hogwarts Legacy isn't trolls or goblins. It's the camera itself, during combat specifically. See, the thing is that the camera doesn't zoom out during combat, and it doesn't try to automatically rotate to nearby threats, it just kind of sits there. Now, on the PC version, you can use mouse and keyboard, so you're turning the camera while attacking at the same time. But you don't have a crosshair in the middle of your screen, so you kind of just gotta guess where the middle of your screen is to hopefully cast your spell on the right enemy. But then if you're on console, it's different, because to cast spells, you're holding the trigger and then pressing all of the face buttons, which means that I can't use my thumb to rotate the camera or lock onto enemies while I'm busy casting my offensive spells. Now, does this make the game unplayable? No. Does it make it less enjoyable? Sometimes. The thing is, none of this was particularly frustrating to me. It was just kind of annoying. Like, you'll often end up being attacked from every conceivable angle and get smacked by off-screen enemies a lot. So moving on to the exploration aspect of the game. Well, at first it might seem fairly basic, with you running around unlocking fast travel points, visiting shops, and a lot of copy and paste enemy camps and whatnot. But after a few hours of playing, eventually you'll end up coming upon a quest that will unlock the broomstick and ability to fly anywhere. I cannot stress enough how fun and refreshing it is to have an open world game with flight. I literally cannot even remember the last game that had this. Now, keep in mind, you won't be flying during the majority of main quests, but it definitely makes exploring this massive open world way funner than it already was. This game looks amazing. Like, there's no question about it. Anytime I would see some creature from the Harry Potter universe, someone in chat would freak out like, oh, it looks the same as the movies. Not that I remember or even know or care. Like, a lot of it might look like generic forest, but it's all been painstakingly created with respect to the fans. I think one of the craziest things to me about Hogwarts Legacy is that time and time again, I would notice these small little things that the developers would throw into the game and never use again. Like during one quest, you're flying over a lake and you get a glimpse of a sea monster that was apparently in the movies, and that's the only time you ever see it. This amount of care for such small details did not go unnoticed. The other thing too is that with the ability to fly pretty much everywhere, it means that places like Hogwarts Academy, they had to end up having every conceivable angle created to look good. Like normally in a game where you're stuck on the ground, they don't need to render the roof in high quality, but we can fly right up to that. Now, while we're talking about graphics, I would like to discuss the UI and the menus in the game, because they feel very dated. Like you'll constantly have to wait for animations to finish in order to navigate through simple menus. The map of Hogwarts is just difficult to navigate no matter who you are. And yeah, I did eventually end up getting used to navigating all of it, and technically, yeah, it's a small gripe in a laundry list of everything that the game does right. But after playing for hours and hours and hours, that small little issue starts to swell up a bit. Let it be known, I did not like the UI in this game. I wanted things to be a lot cleaner and a lot more snappy. I wanted to be able to sell stuff from my inventory or scrap it for resources rather than having to go to the shop or delete the item entirely because I only can carry 10 robes. The sound design in this game is incredible. Characters talk and sound like real people. The spell casting packs a huge punch, and the music just, ooh, the music. Like while you're talking with someone, the music will have its own conversation with you, telling you how you should feel. What I found most impressive was that during boss fights in particular, the boss music would end up swelling up as you got to the further phases in the boss fight, and it wouldn't just abruptly stop once you beat the boss. It would seamlessly go into the next scene so that you could end up feeling like you're watching a movie. Now, another thing that I like to discuss in my reviews is replayability. And unfortunately, there's barely any replay value for this game, in my opinion, because first of all, there's no New Game Plus. Honestly, I don't know if I want New Game Plus in an open world game. But the problem is that once you're done with the main story missions, the difference in quality between the main story missions and optional quests is very apparent.
I'm truly sorry.
Like for completionists, there is a staggering amount of fun to be had doing everything in this open world. And the open world has tons and tons of stuff to do. But the average player is probably going to end up finding the main story satisfactory enough. Overall, I think Hogwarts Legacy is an incredible single player game that anyone who enjoys open world RPGs should play. However, I think that myself and many others look at the fact that this is a single player game and don't want to invest too much time into it versus if it had multiplayer, for example. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that this game will be a contender at the Game of the Year awards. Honestly, the main story alone to me is a 10 out of 10. I loved it. And even the optional content, it's not like it's bad or anything. It's just that it's very, very Assassin's Creed. Like there's a lot of copy and paste caves, bandit camps. You'll fight the same troll enemy like over and over again. But even though it sounds like I'm being overly critical, which I am, I'm a critical person and this is a review, think about it this way. I'm complaining that this game has too much content. Okay, now this is going to actually be the hardest part of the video because I've actually recorded this segment over and over again, which is the rating of this game. I'm going to give this game a solid 4 out of 5. Now, the way that my rating system works is a 1 is a pass, don't bother buying it. A 2 is the average game. 3 is above average. 4 is a game that's definitely worth your time, with 5 being master class. Now, the thing is, for me, I personally feel that the only way a game can end up being a 5 is if either mechanically it is flawless. Like it basically is setting out to do one specific goal and it executes it perfectly. The other option, though, is it has to be a game that is just so interesting or so much content and gameplay to it that it's something that I could just not get tired of. And even though the story and music and all the stuff that I reviewed today is absolutely awesome, what I'm heavily criticizing and what is keeping this game from being a perfect score for me is the open world aspect of the game doesn't bring anything new to the table. Other than being able to fly, it still is just go to this bandit camp, kill everybody, fly to the next bandit camp. Like, the funny thing is, I still find myself at the end of the day comparing every open world game to Zelda Breath of the Wild, because that game was like 5 to 10 years ahead of the competition. And arguably, a lot of open world games have been heavily inspired by Zelda. Hogwarts is no exception. There's a lot of puzzles that are very similar, if not complete ripoffs of what was in Zelda. But the funny thing is that Zelda ended up having an open-ended way that you could approach a situation from multiple different angles. Whereas this game has all of the different magic and stuff, which is cool, but the puzzles only have one solid solution. And usually when you end up finding like a cave or something, it just means you gotta figure out what the solution is, go into the cave, grab the treasure, that's it, you're done. The funny thing is that it seems unfair in a way to end up comparing a game like Hogwarts to Zelda Breath of the Wild. But you look at a game like Elden Ring and it ripped off Breath of the Wild, and that's why it's one of the best open world games that there is, because it's Breath of the Wild but a Souls-like. There's a lot of aspects of this Hogwarts game that are just so phenomenal. Like, the quality of the game is something that I would never question. But the gameplay outside of doing the main story content, that's where it really starts to suffer. And what can I say? It just starts feeling a little bit samey to me, you know? I hate to end this video on a downer though, and do want to reiterate that this is still a 4 out of 5 rating and a game that I would highly recommend that you play. At the very least, it was better than God of War Ragnarok.